Well, the New York Mets have gotten their left-handed bat for the outfield. Jesse Winker is going to be a New York Met.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All you amazing Mets fans, you're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, the dream reunion we talked about on yesterday's show is dead. Michael Conforto will not be a New York Met again, or at least for right now. Instead, it is Jesse Winker, who was once a villain, now turned hero, a guy that Mets fans are probably going to fall in love with. He is coming aboard, hopping on this train for the rest of the season. Jesse Winker coming over from the Washington Nationals. At least that's what all reports indicate. The deal is not final as I record this at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I don't know who the prospect is going back to the Nationals. I imagine it's not a significant return. And once I see that name, assuming it's not somebody that I really care for as a prospect, I'll like this deal a lot more. If I find out that Dom Hamill is going back to the Nationals for Jesse Winker, I'm probably going to hate this move even more than I sort of do now. If it's Kevin Parada, I'm going to love it. Okay, so that's going to really instruct me how to feel. I have talked about Winker coming to the Mets on this show, and I can't just all of a sudden, now that he is a Met, turn back around and change my opinion on this. I did not like this fit. I preferred the Mets trading for Lane Thomas over Jesse Winker because my vision, or my viewpoint, I should say, of what the Mets needed in the outfield is a right-handed bat that can hit left-handed pitching, because they're two right-handed bats that are healthy, Starling Marte being excluded because he's still hurt, have reverse splits this year. Harrison Bader and Tyrone Taylor have not hit lefties well at all. Now, maybe the Mets feel that's going to change. Maybe they don't really view that the same way I do because they have more information and they're not reading into the splits as much. If that's the case, they know more than me. They clearly identified that they were looking for a left-handed bat. And while I love the idea of Michael Conforto coming on home, it is hard to ignore the fact that Jesse Winker has had a much better season than Michael Conforto. He's hitting 253, 372 on base, 417 slug, but that doesn't even tell the whole story. Against right-handed pitching, Jesse Winker is hitting 261 this year with a 387 on base and a 447 slugging percentage. That is an 834 OPS. He has a WRC plus of 138. Now that means weighted runs created plus, and is measured on a league average of 100. So Jesse Winker has been 38% better than the league average hitter against right-handed pitching. Really good results. He is elite at at not chasing and drawing walks. This year, Jesse Winker has walked at a 14% clip. That is great. He is chasing at only an 18.8% clip. Those two stats rank him among the top 3% of the league, or the top 4%. He's in the 97th percentile, right? So he has been very good at plate discipline. This is basically a supercharged version of what DJ Stewart is supposed to be. A guy that can run into a home run. He's got 11 on the season, 10 of them against right-handed pitching. And he's getting on base at a great clip. He has good plate discipline. You can see him batting behind Pete Alonso in that fifth spot in the lineup, where if they walk Pete, Winker's the protection. He might be able to get a hit to drive in a run, and he's going to put himself in good counts. So if there's a runner on third base, less than 2 outs, you think that Winker's going to be able to get the ball in the air and get that run in. He's a player that I think will thrive in New York, and Mets fans will love him. He was a villain once. Now he's turned hero. And even as a villain, he was a lovable villain. There's a lot of stuff you can go back to as far as Winker and his time with the Reds, playing against the Mets, the waving goodbye on the sliding catch, the giving the fan an autographed ball who had a sign about him. He really has thrived and loved that idea of playing on the big stage, and has talked very highly of Mets fans. So there's a lot of things to like about this the more you think about it, and I will ultimately come around. But my apprehension towards Jesse Winker has been the fact that, for one, he doesn't impact the baseball particularly well. If you look at his bat speed in particular, bottom 15 percentile of the league. Hard hit rate, not great. Barrel percentage, not great. Average exit velocity, not great. All those numbers a little bit close to league average, but hard hit rate in the 37th percentile. His expected slug, expected batting average, both worse than his actual batting average, actual slugging percentage. He just doesn't drive the baseball with authority. Now, he puts himself in good positions due to that discipline, has hit some home runs this year. He's also become a threat on the bases, 14 stolen bases on 18 attempts. With that said, you look at base running value, he's actually in the 1 percentile. He is among the worst base runners in baseball based on base running value. Now, that's an interesting stat. I don't know how much to read into it, but that's just something to point out. And defensively, he has not been good, -8 outs above average. And that's my biggest issue with this. I don't see the fit positionally. The reason why I got the interest in Conforto and was really excited about it, not just because I'm a massive Conforto fan, but he's played right field at Citi Field for a very long time. I think he would be a solid outfielder, going right back to a very familiar spot. Jesse Winker has not played right field on a consistent basis since 2018. He's been playing left and has not been playing it well. How are the Mets lining up their outfield? Jesse Winker comes into the fold. Let's say it's on Monday. Is his first game, right? Where is he going to play? Is he playing right and Nimmo's in left? Bader's in center. Right now, Bader's been hurt with an ankle injury. Maybe there's more there than we know right now. Maybe maybe Bader is going to hit the IL. In which case, Brandon Nimmo's in center, Winker's in left. It makes a lot more sense to me. Maybe Jeff McNeil's in right. But for me, the way Jeff McNeil's been hitting, had another double today. I just think that for the rest of the season, Jeff McNeil is a better player to be getting consistent run than Jesse Winker. Now, you look at their season stats, that sounds ridiculous, but McNeil's hot and he can play a good right field. I think Winker is going to be a problem out there defensively. Now, DJ Stewart has been getting starts lately in right. So you look at it from that lens, a upgrade over Stewart, huge win for the Mets. Massive, massive upgrade. DJ Stewart has been bad for months now. Jesse Winker can play right field as good as Stewart. It's not like Stewart is great out there. And he has been a very good hitter. And he lengthens that lineup for sure. So I'm very, very split on how to feel about this. If I find out that, all right, it was Kevin Parada setting this deal, or Alex Ramirez, or Joander Suarez, or some 17-year-old I've never heard of before, maybe it's Justin Jarvis. If it's a prospect that isn't really one that I look at and think they have a big future with the Mets, yeah, I'm going to come around to this because this is a clear upgrade. But if the Mets traded Dom Hamill in this deal, I would really dislike it. I would. So it's just one of those things. We got to see what the prospect is and then how they're going to line it up in the outfield, because I do think that's an issue. But if Jesse Winker is a 6-inning player, starts the game in right field, plays and gets his first 3 at-bats, if you have a lead, you put Tyrone Taylor out there, I can come around to it. And also the fact that he can hang in left, and if Nimmo's in center because Bader's not playing right now, well, then I get it for the short term of it. And when Starling Marte comes back, Jesse Winker might end up being, a bench bat that does give you that left-handed, I wouldn't say pop because he doesn't have a ton of it, but just the quality left-handed bat that you can call on late in games in a big spot if you want to. So I think, again, upgrade, not the upgrade I would have chosen, but for now, I reserve to wait for the prospect return before I really tell you my ultimate thoughts on it. The big thing, though, is the Mets have to keep adding, and particularly pitching. That's the thing. If they had a list of tasks and this was one of them, good. They checked it off early and they can set that aside. They have to address this pitching staff because Kodai Senga is not going to be back this year, or at least not until the playoffs. I want to talk about that and Tylor Megill's addition to stay in the rotation on Saturday. We'll go through in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games. It's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rivals' cities with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. I actually have a wedding I'm going to in a couple months. You know what I did? Went to Booking.com and I just booked my stay. got a great deal and really comfortable accommodations it look like. So I'm very excited about that. The Booking.com app is very easy to use, and the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. So book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sports in like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, because all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. And the New York Mets got some bad news on Saturday. The calf strain that Kodai Senga suffered on Friday night was deemed a high-grade calf strain, and Carlos Mendoza ruled him out for the rest of the season. Now, he was talking about the regular season. There's still hope that maybe Kodai Senga, after a long period here of a couple months of rest, rehab, recovery, building himself back up again, maybe we could see Kodai Senga pitch in the playoffs, but that is not something that you can count on. So this rotation is down to 4 starters. You have Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, and David Peterson. And then Tylor Megill is currently in that 5th spot, and he made his audition to get back into this rotation for the rest of the season on Saturday. And it was such a mixed bag, because there was moments where Tylor Megill looked great, where he was striking out batters, where he was attacking the zone, and you thought, okay, remember, he does have some pretty good stuff. Maybe he can stick. Maybe Tylor Megill is just fine as the Mets' 5th starter. And then he started giving up home runs. Ultimately, he gives up 4 runs on 3 homers. He goes 6+ innings. He was pitching in the 7th because his pitch count was low, but then he gave up another home run. So that was the 3rd homer that he allowed. Solo shot to lead off the inning. He then walked his second batter of the day, and that's when Carlos Mendoza grabbed him, put Danny Young out there. Danny Young, actually, pretty good performance, 5 strikeouts and 2 scoreless innings, but the Mets just couldn't score in this game. So really, they lost because they didn't hit. They did not draw a single walk. Jesse Winker should help that. Got only 4 hits, struck out 14 times. Spencer Schwellenbach looked unbelievable for the Braves. So it's just a bad game. But to me, as much as it's a loss and it's frustrating, you still have an opportunity on Sunday to go out and win a series. That's great. But this was more about Megill, especially after the news on Kodai Senga. And while I think that the Mets can still hold on to a playoff spot if Tylor Megill is starting every 5th day throughout the rest of this season, I still think that's the case. I think you can win games with Megill where a couple of those home runs don't go out. But after the game, he's talking to the media, and he mentioned the couple home runs you could tip the cap on, the one mistake he made, all that stuff. And we've heard it before. And at a certain point, you just have to wonder if this guy's not very good. And we've talked about it. And I hate to just pile on the guy, but you are what your stats say at a certain point. And he just has not pitched well. He is a swing man who, is perpetually going to be 7th in your depth chart when it comes to your rotation, who can eat innings for you at times. But ultimately, he's not a viable pitcher to hold a spot in the rotation long term. He's just not. And even for the rest of this season, you're better off with Jose Butto in that spot. The problem is you can't lose Butto from that bullpen right now. So there's such a give and take there. The Mets either have to be uber aggressive at adding to their bullpen, or they got to find a starting pitcher. And the problem with finding a starting pitcher, there's not a lot of guys that are on the market. They have showed some interest in Eric Fedde. Eric Fedde pitched on Saturday as well, going up against the Seattle Mariners. He went 4 innings, allowed 3 runs on 6 hits, 2 walks, struck out 4. He's been good this year, 3.11 ERA, 108 strikeouts, and 121 2/3 innings pitched, all coming as a member of the Chicago White Sox. But the Mets had interest in signing Fedde in the offseason, and he chose Chicago. How is he going to pitch coming to New York? The Mets are interested in getting, but I just don't know how he's going to fare. The contract is great. 2 years, $15 million for a quality big league starter. there's a lot of teams that are interested in Eric Fedde because he's available, and there's so many teams that need innings. The Brewers are in on Eric Fedde. That's the perfect fit for them because they need just another guy that they can hand the ball to, that can make starts. And there's a lot of teams that are looking at Fedde in that same light. So if there's more of a market for Eric Fedde than some other guys out there, he might require a pretty decent prospect haul to get him. Not that you're going to have to give up, Jet Williams or Drew Gilbert for him, but you might have to trade Luis Angel Acuna to get Eric Fedde. And how are Mets fans going to feel about that? So I just look at what's out there, and I'm really curious if they even can make a move. We talked about Blake Snell on yesterday's show. That seems like the best possible fit. Problem, he just completely juiced his trade value for the Giants. His start on Saturday, he faced the Rockies, not a great team, but he went 6 innings, allowed just 2 hits, walked 2, struck out a career-high 15 batters. So Blake Snell, now far anxiety can say, is all the way back. Blake Snell is Cy Young Blake Snell again. We are trading a guy that can win you a World Series. They have all the leverage in that regard, and they can ask for a very big return. The contract is going to dampen it, and I really don't know how many teams can conceivably bring him on based on that contract. I think it's the Mets, it's the Dodgers, it's potentially off chance the Astros, maybe the Phillies. Other than that, there's just not a lot of teams that I think would be willing to take on that contract, despite how good he can be. It just doesn't necessarily allow a lot of teams to be on it, because how many teams are willing to pay a pitcher $30 million next year? Like the Brewers could absolutely use Blake Snell, but they can't put him on their payroll next year if he opts into that contract. So I don't know where he's going to land. To me, Blake Snell still makes the most sense, and I think he's the guy that I'd be willing to see the Mets trade some prospects for. But if not him, then who? The Toronto Blue Jays said they're keeping Chris Bassett. He would be a great fit. So would Kevin Gausman, but they said they're keeping those guys. Usei Kikuchi's going to be out there because he's a rental, but he's got a 4.75 ERA this year. A lot of strikeouts, but a very ballooned ERA. And I remember there was a point this season where Kikuchi was great, so I didn't look at the splits on that, but I imagine he's been pitching poorly lately. It's really tough. And the more you think about the starting pitching market, the more I start to come back around to the idea that, all right, maybe you got to pull Budo from the bullpen, slide him into the rotation. It's just then a matter of, well, what are you doing to fortify that bullpen? Is Tylor Megill going to pitch better out of the pen? Do you try that? Are you going to call up Brandon Sproat like I've talked about on many occasions? Because that could be very exciting. Could Sproat just go from double-A to your big league rotation? I don't know here. I'm fascinated to see what David Stearns and company are planning to do, because it's clear they have to add pitching. There's no doubt about that. But who do you add? And what are you willing to give up to make that deal? That's what I want to talk about next. I went over the untouchable prospects yesterday. If the Mets are going to swing a deal for a big starting pitcher, namely Blake Snell, what are you willing for them to give up to make that happen? So I want to talk about that to close out the show. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. If eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. If you are an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where I send you updates anytime some news breaks on the Mets. Unless they trade for Jesse Winker and it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning when I noticed that deal, because I felt like that was a little bit too late to be sending people a text message. But other than that, when a trade happens during the day, I will go to subtext first. You can also ask me questions anytime, and you can take part in and our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, what would you be willing to see the Mets give up to get Blake Snell or Eric Fetty or any other starting pitcher that could become available? Jamison Tyone was thrown out there by somebody today, pitching from the Cubs. Pretty big contract. I think it's like $18 million, something like that. But a guy that would be under contract for next year. He's a name. He's an option. If the Rangers decided to sell, maybe it's Nathan Eovaldi, but doesn't seem like they will. If the Blue Jays are just making that public stance that Bassett or Gossman is unavailable, but you actually can still make some phone calls and make that happen. If you're trying to trade for any of these guys, what is the best possible package you can put together that you're comfortable sending out for a win now move that doesn't hurt your future too much? So I looked through, and I talked about this on yesterday's show, Untouchable Prospects. Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, Brandon Sproat, Christian Scott, Carson Bench, off the table for me. Okay, so what's left? To me, Luisangel Acuna would probably have to headline any trade package, and it could be a situation where you have to give up Brett Beatty too for Blake Snell. It just depends on the market, and that might not be enough. If there is a robust market for Blake Snell, if the Dodgers are in on the bidding, they have a deeper farm system to trade from that can put together a more attractive package to get a deal done, or they can afford to give up a better top-end prospect to get that type of a trade done. So I really don't know exactly what it takes. I think it probably starts with Acuna, and that's if the Giants like him. If not Acuna, Beatty. If not both of them, then Ronnie Mauricio is a piece that could be dealt. And beyond that, maybe you do have to consider trading someone like Jonah Tong, who I would hate to see go, but it's not Brandon Sproat. It's not Christian Scott. Maybe it has to be Blade Tidwell. Maybe the package is Blade Tidwell, Luisangel Acuna, and then, some filler prospects. Who knows? I don't know what the return is for Blake Snell because I have a real trouble figuring out what his value is based on how poorly he's pitched prior to his past 4 starts. But then he just showed everyone before the deadline, even against the Rockies, 15 strikeouts. That says something about his stuff, and we know what kind of pitcher he can be. And guess what? If he opts into that contract for next year, he's your ace for the 2025 season. That's the guy that you can trade for right now that can win you a playoff game and can take you on a run in the playoffs. I don't believe in Eric Fetty to that degree. Now, Chris Bassett, to me, it's a better version of Fetty, where Fetty is trying to become the pitcher that Chris Bassett is, a reliable middle of the rotation starter in the big leagues. And he's done it for a bad team this year. But when you put him, you take the guy who struggled in DC, went to the KBO and won a Triple Crown, came back and chose the situation where he was pitching on the bad team. Now, part of that was probably knowing that that was his best chance to stick in a rotation, but also it's a very pressure-free situation. Does my stuff play against big league hitters? Let's find out. Let's go to a team where I'm going to start every 5th day. I just focus on me. I don't have to worry about winning. It's a complete rebuild situation. And then at the deadline, maybe I get traded to a winning situation. He's done that. Great signing by the White Sox. Am I trading Acuna or Blade Tidwell for him? No, I'm not. Would I trade those guys, or at least one of them, for Chris Bassett? Absolutely, because Chris Bassett is more proven. Chris Bassett, you can pretty much pencil him in to pitch 180 innings next year, and he's shown that he can thrive in New York. Now, Mets fans are going to completely disagree with me on that, or at least a subsection of Mets fans, because they're going to say, well, Chris Bassett was horrible against the Braves in a game that mattered at the end of 2022, where everything was hanging in the balance to win the division. And then in the playoff game, he was even worse. But Chris Bassett is a really good quality starting pitcher. He's got a 3.78 ERA this year in 21 starts. He just knows how to pitch. He does. And he's a real reason why the Mets won over 100 games that year. He might not have won the ones that counted in the very end, but he was very, very good on that Mets team. He won 15 games. He pitched 181 and 2/3 innings. And then last year, he reached 200 innings pitched for the first time. And this year, he's, like I said, at about 120, trending towards another 180 innings pitched. So right now, if you had to ask me, my two favorites that the Mets could acquire at this deadline, it's clearly Blake Snell or it's Chris Bassett. And then the alternative, I'm not that in on Fetty, which means they'll probably trade for him. Fetty and Winker, guys that I don't want. Boom. That's the deadline for the Mets. To me, if you can go and grab two lights out relievers, I don't know who they are. I've said that I don't want to see the Mets trading significant stuff for Tanner Scott as a rental. And look, Blake Snell could be a rental. So talking out of both sides of my mouth, but to me, Blake Snell as a rental could give you a lot more value. Plus, I don't know if he's actually going to opt out of that contract. Just depends on how it works throughout the rest of the season. Tanner Scott is the best reliever left. Carlos Estevez already got traded. Yimi Garcia got traded. But there's still other relievers on the market. We've talked about Jason Foley. Chad Green I talked about a lot. David Robertson could be on the move. Still a lot of names out there. If the Mets can swing a couple of those deals, fortify that bullpen, slide Budo into the rotation, I actually think that could be enough. They've made the addition of Jesse Winker to help take a good lineup and make it better. They added Ryan Stanek to give them another option in that bullpen. So at least now you have Stanek, Maton, Diaz, and then you still have Daniel Nunez, Reed Garrett, and Sean Reed Foley, who could be back at some point in August and worst case in September. There's ways the Mets can sort of navigate the rest of this season without making a big addition to their rotation. With Budo being that addition, it's just going to require a lot more heavy lifting on the bullpen side of things. But David Stern still has 72 hours here. As you're listening to this, probably a little bit less than that. But I still got Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday to continue to fortify this roster. And if one thing is clear, the Mets believe in this team. They're being aggressive. The goal is to win this year. And it's a hats off to all the players for making that happen. Hopefully, with David Peterson on the mound, they can make another series victory happen and get back ahead of the Braves in the wild card race. I'll be breaking down everything from the game on Monday's show and whatever happens next at the trade deadline here for Monday's edition of the show. I appreciate all of you who tuned in today. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to make a push to 10,000 subs, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports today, which is also streaming 24/7 on Amazon Fire TV.